Everything is falling into place for Michigan. Things are heating up in the transfer portal. Chip Lindsey is officially announced as the offensive coordinator. Fans need to be patient with things kind of lining up, and we'll talk a little bit about why. Because there's a lot of impatience that I'm seeing, and I think you just need to just hold your horses to some degree. I understand the Bryce Underwood of it all made you very excited about things happening fast. Doesn't always work out that way. Let's talk about it on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We're back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Wohl, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And yes, it is transfer portal is going. I actually started the podcast and stopped because Tommy Doman makes the first Michigan player heading elsewhere officially. He is committing to Florida. Alex Orji entered the transfer portal today. So there are some Wolverines who are headed elsewhere. Some of them are surprises. Like, I'm kind of surprised about Doman, but, you know, it's not like he had a season that you're like, man, just really need to get this guy back. No offense to Tommy, but I'm sure he knows that. And I wonder if it's kind of that Jake Thaw thing like I talked about a couple weeks ago. But nonetheless, there are going to be guys who leave. It's just part of it. But there are also some guys that you can kind of expect to come. Now, you wonder a little bit about Donovan McCulley. He visited the day after the Ohio State game and got some predictions that he would end up in Ann Arbor. And as of yet, that still has not happened. I'm fine with that personally. I mean, at least he's a guy who's got production in Big Ten play, but I'd kind of want to keep my options open a little bit, especially considering he didn't play the majority of 2024. That raises some red flags for me a little. But Billy Edwards, the Maryland starting quarterback this year, ended up entering the transfer portal last night and immediately got predictions to Michigan. Pretty close to immediately. I think those happened this morning. But talking to a couple colleagues, two of them basically told me to be on the lookout for Michigan, and then you see all that stuff come in. Okay, so there's that. Obviously, Michigan's they're hosting different guys. Keyshawn Silver, I believe, is here today. You've got the offensive lineman from Liberty. You're hosting Josh Thompson, the Fentonian, from Northwestern early next week. So you've got certain guys that are on the radar at this moment. But I understand that there is a lot of hesitance from people because they're like, why have we not seen the bevy of commits? Why has this just not been like everyone's just flocking to Ann Arbor? Well, it's because it's going to take some time. And I looked yesterday or the day before or something like that at I was on On3's transfer portal rankings. And of the top 100 guys in the transfer portal, only 5 had committed anywhere. And it was just like a handful of guys. It was Mensa, the quarterback from Tulane, who transferred to Duke. It was Thomas Castellanos, who was at Boston College and committed to Florida State, and just a couple guys. It really wasn't very much. Connor Weigman, it was just a handful of quarterbacks. Only now are we starting to see guys, because they have to go through their paces. They're going through a whole new recruitment and all of these things once again. So you have to understand patience, but you also have to understand that there's the possibility Michigan has its eyes on some who are entering the portal but hadn't necessarily done so yet. And I'm not talking about tampering, but what I am talking about is there are guys whose agents have been kind of shopping them for some time because they knew, like, hey, I'm not going to stick around, see what else is out there for me. Not saying that they're going to end up in Ann Arbor, but one such name, you saw Clayton Sayfie put a little, emoji on his tweet, and I replied with the same one. Is it's someone that I I had mentioned kind of vaguely that you would want to look out for this guy in the transfer portal, and it's Justice Haynes, the running back from Alabama, because I had heard from a non-Michigan source about a month and a half-ish ago. I think maybe it was about a month ago. Don't be surprised if he ends up at Michigan. Now, will that happen? I don't know. It's there's things you hear. Dan Mullen, Byron Leftwich are being pitched to Bryce Underwood. Neither of them end up being the guy. So you don't really know for sure how that's going to work out. But nonetheless, I would keep my eyes open to see if there's any movement with Michigan there. Might be, might not be, right? Might have been like a month ago. It's like, yeah, he kind of loves the idea of going and playing at Michigan. Michigan didn't have its offensive coordinator in yet. Michigan didn't have Bryce Underwood in the fold at that time yet. Like, I know these are things that should make Michigan more positive, but you don't know where other teams might kind of fall in terms of all of that. So it'll be interesting to see where this team ends up being in terms of that. But with that in mind, just be patient, right? Like, it's how many times do we kind of have to have this conversation? Because I'm perusing the message boards and I just see people just like they're ready to quit on college football because Michigan hasn't necessarily fully rebuilt its team as of yet, right? People are still entering the transfer portal. Alex Orji entered the transfer portal today. Billy Edwards, who very likely it sounds like will end up in Ann Arbor, entered the transfer portal yesterday, right? Like, this isn't, these things don't always necessarily, it's a period, right? And it's a truncated version of recruiting. And yet with recruiting, it seems like every year minus, I think, last year, which I don't think ended up being an extremely good class. Ultimately, once you kind of look at it from top to bottom, I guess we'll see, time will tell. But it seems like every year you're sitting there, we're sitting there in like May, early June, and I have to talk a bunch of people off of a ledge because they're just of the mindset of, why do we not have a full class right now? And they look around at other schools. Well, how did it end up so far, right? Like Michigan's, once everything's said and done in February, if the Ty Haywood of it all works out and or Zahir Mathis, you're probably looking at a top 5 class. But no one, obviously just that's how recruiting works. You just kind of got to be patient a little bit because it's not always about just like, oh man, yeah, if you ain't first, you're last in terms of like the speed of building out things. But like, I don't think Ohio State's gotten anybody. I don't think Alabama's gotten anybody. I don't think Texas has gotten anybody, right? I understand there's more people that seem to be looking at those schools that are high profile names. Just be patient. Michigan's operating in the way that it's operating, and it's been working so far in the last couple months. Just let things play out. I know that's easier said than done, but just don't, there's no reason to have a conniption a couple days after the portal's opened, right? Like it's been more of like, let's see who's available. And we're still learning who's available on a daily basis. So just kind of be patient with that and go from there. We're going to talk about Billy Edwards and where he kind of fits in, some of his stats, some of how he probably fits in with Chip Lindsey, why I think that's a good move. I don't think it's like an incredible move, but I don't think it needs to be. I'll explain why, and we'll do so here in just a moment. But before we do, listen, you're going to want to get to all kinds of events. Maybe you're a Tennessee fan that is just sitting here just basking in the Ohio State craziness. And you're thinking you want to go to the shoe next week. Or maybe you're a Michigan fan that wants to go wearing a Tennessee jersey. I don't know. I don't know what you do. The best way to get in the door is actually through Game Time. Now, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They've got all kinds of things like the super deal, the curated deals that make it easier to find the best prices on great seats, seat views before you buy, the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, all of that kind of stuff. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, we're going to continue on here in just a moment. But before we do, listen, college football season has made its regular season closing statement. But as the weather turns, you're going to need to gear up with some of the coolest, or I should say warmest, Michigan apparel in the game. You've heard me talking about it for years. You've seen me wearing it frequently, including right now if you're watching on video. And that's the gear I get from Home Field. Home Field is a premium collegiate apparel company based out of Indianapolis, and there's no place I'd rather get my Michigan gear from. With their retro modern style, Home Field scours every school's history to find those amazing, unique designs that you're going to want to have, and it's going to really make you stand out. They just launched these amazing retro college football sweaters today. They are beyond beautiful. You can get things like this amazing national championship coach's jacket that was out of stock for the longest time. I'm sure it's on its way there if it isn't already. I get questions about this every time I wear it, and I'm here to tell you, y'all can't be skipping through ads here because I'm telling you about this. They've still got their can't miss kickoff bundle with a hoodie, a long sleeve, a short sleeve, a koozie, a hat if you want to spring for that. Comes with some socks. So go to homefieldapparel.com, use my code GOBLUE24 to get 15% off of your first order. That's homefieldapparel.com, promo code GOBLUE24 to get 15% off your first order. Home Field Apparel, just the coolest college gear anywhere. All right, let's talk Billy Edwards. What does he bring to the table? So before we get to that, apologize if I'm ornery today. I'm very tired. I haven't slept well the last couple days. I've been amped up at night. Should be doing the podcast at 3 a.m. It'd be full of energy. Circadian rhythm is out of whack. Before I even get into Billy Edwards as a player, let's talk about what I said kind of coming into the break, which is I think it's a good fit. It's not necessarily like something you're going to write home about in terms of like, this is it. This is the final piece. But I've seen a lot of comments, mostly on like the message boards or Wolverines Wire's Facebook comment section, that people it's a weird mix. Some want like the reincarnation of John Elway at his prime, and some don't want anyone at all because they were like, you're going to scare Bryce away. That number one, Bryce knows that this was coming, that they're trying to get a transfer quarterback. And he welcomes that, needs and welcomes the competition with a seasoned veteran, and is someone who could potentially beat him out, right? So this is kind of the best case because it's someone who can sling the ball, has the similar abilities in terms of play style. Now, not in terms of talent, but is a guy who can run the ball. He's a big, tall guy like Bryce, and he's going to sling the ball around. Okay, so it has some things that are similar in terms of that, but is a guy that Bryce can beat out, but it won't necessarily beat him out right away, right? So that kind of works. I was getting eyelash in here. Anyway, so Billy Edwards stat wise, first year as the starter for Maryland, played in 11 games. Got injured in the penultimate regular season game, but 420 attempts, 273 completions. That's a percentage of 65%. He threw for 2,881 yards. That's 15 touchdowns and 9 interceptions as far as that's concerned. So you look at his games. He had a couple subpar games that would have been considered high benchmarks for Michigan this year. Granted, some of them were really trying to throw the ball a lot, right? Maryland tried to throw the ball a lot in some of these games. Against Northwestern, 51 attempts, 50 against USC, 44 against Oregon, 55 against Rutgers. But that's also because Maryland was down quite a bit, right? We don't know Maryland to be like this highbrow defensive team generally. But he had a couple games where he was around the 200 mark. 201 against Minnesota, 206 against Oregon. Relatively low completion percentages in those games. Not surprising. Those are good defenses. But he eclipsed 300 yards in a few as well. 311 against UConn, 328 against Villanova. Okay, whatever, right? 373 against USC, 335 against Rutgers, just shy of 300 against Northwestern. So and then he's got a couple that are more middling as far as that's concerned. But he also can and has run the ball, not always like crazy effectively. He's not running for 100 yards a game, but you look at Minnesota, 5 for 30. You look at Oregon, 9 for 24, 7 for 28 against Rutgers. He did have against Indiana, 9 for negative 33. So a lot of sacks and tackles for loss, things of that nature. But can keep a defense honest with his legs. So you can kind of work those things in, and that kind of works out perfectly for the Bryce Underwood of it all. Assuming, again, Billy Edwards does come. Looking at the PFF stats as far as his passer, looking at 19 starters, essentially. Who's the double up here? Let's figure that out before we get too far. Wisconsin, I'm assuming. I'm assuming it's Wisconsin because we did it by 20% of minimum dropbacks here. No, USC. You had Miller Moss and Jaden Maeva. Now he's just behind Maeva at 10. That's right in the middle. Not anything crazy, not anything terrible. Has a passer rating here on PFF, a 75.9. When it comes to offense in general, like his just overall offensive ability, that's where he's moves up to number 8, just behind Will Howard and Hudson Card. I mean, everyone loves him, right? But far ahead of Davis Warren in both. Okay, so that's good as far as that's concerned. I'm not going to get too deep into all of these numbers, especially because I don't remember what the key is straight away here. Big time throw rate. Okay, there we go. We will look at that. Big time throws. He actually leads the pack with 21. Big time throw rate percentage 4.7. But he had 21. That's the most big time throws of any quarterback in the Big Ten. Okay, he's certainly, when you look at yards overall, he's third in the conference. Again, they attempted a lot more in terms of completion percentage. He's 9th, so he's kind of middling, actually exactly middling as far as that's concerned. As far as dropbacks, he's actually top in the Big Ten. So you would expect some of those numbers to go down in some ways, but he made a lot of big time throws, which is very important to note. Okay. Average depth of target, we will look at that real quick as well. He is, again, middling at 10, which is fine because that's the kind of the Michigan offense. So it kind of fits in perfectly with what Chip Lindsey is probably going to want to do, right? Like he's not necessarily like when you hear like air raid but smash, like that doesn't necessarily mean all downfield throws, right? You're gonna have to think of a marriage between what Sharon Moore wants and what Chip Lindsey wants, right? It's gonna be more downfield throws than we saw certainly this year, and probably more than we saw a little bit throughout the season. But when you consider like his average depth of target is 8.5. Well, that's a heck of a lot better than Davis Warren, who's at dead last at 6.6. All right. It's not necessarily going to be like anything just absolutely insane. There's still going to be a lot of screens. There's going to be a lot of underneath stuff, lots of stuff like that. So there's all of that. Anyway, yeah, I think it's a good fit. I think that it will be interesting to see how quickly can Bryce win the job? Because he's not an off limits type of guy. I don't think he necessarily, like, he might have NFL draft aspirations, but he's not a guy like Miller Moss, who's probably more so thinking like, I've really got a shot here. I need to go at some place where I can really prove it. He can kind of be a little bit more in like a Jack Tuttle type of scenario with JJ McCarthy. And I think that I would assume that that's going to be more likely here. So I think that is a good move for both parties. And can certainly mentor Bryce, help get him ready, and Bryce will take over when he is ready. And that way, you're not throwing him to the wolves. You're not, you're able to get that all figured out in kind of due time. All right, so let's continue on. I want to talk about people who have just because literally 20 seconds ago. This is why I keep looking at my phone to make sure I don't miss anything. Colston Loveland just declared for the draft, making it the third guy for Michigan to declare for the draft so far. So let's talk about that, about the guys who are leaving, because also I have another correction I want to make. So we'll do that here in just a moment. But before we do get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Colston Loveland makes for the third Wolverine to officially declare for the draft. Joins Mason Graham, who put his name in a couple days ago. Will Johnson yesterday, I believe, made his NFL draft decision. None of these are surprising. I didn't think that there was any chance that any of these guys come back. I know about a month ago, I was like, maybe with a guy like Colston, you can try to get the collective to be like, hey, you want to, can we put in? But I think the injury kind of precludes him a little bit, right? Because he's going to be a first round draft guy. Like that was like a pipe dream, but not necessarily fully unrealistic. You know what I mean? Because it isn't like a Blake Corum situation where he wasn't going to be a day one guy. So that kind of made it a little bit tougher. But best of luck to all of them. They've done everything that they needed to do for the Maize and Blue, which is where I get into the correction, because every time I go on a message board or I go on Facebook, and I don't mean to be like yelling at y'all, but some of y'all need to get a grip a little bit. And that's where we come in here, because I see people who are angry when they see Will Johnson declaring for the draft or Mason Graham declaring for the draft. Like it's your birthright for them to suit up for Michigan in what it does really ultimately essentially end up being a meaningless bowl game. If Michigan beats Alabama in the bowl game, that's great. Michigan's bowl game was against Ohio State. Okay? So, which I was going to say something about Ohio State. That was the plan for segment 3. We'll get to that at the end. But Ohio State fans. But nonetheless, I think that like you just need to understand, like a guy like Jake Butt was a day one draft pick and then plays in a relatively meaningless bowl game. It's not completely meaningless. It was a New Year's Six bowl, the Orange Bowl, and tears his ACL and goes from a day one pick to being a day 3 pick. Like these guys have dreams and aspirations. In no other world would you sit and say they got to play in this game. Right? Like in no other world, like in any career, you would you say like in what essentially is a glorified scrimmage here, right? Let's just be honest about it. It's going to be fun, hopefully. I mean, maybe not in terms of score, but it's going to be fun in terms of atmosphere, in terms of the matchup, in terms of the week that is, being in the sunshine, all of that. But it doesn't really matter. Michigan wins. Okay, cool. You're not going to think any more or less of the season. Maybe you'll think more of it at 8-5 compared to 7-6. But certainly you're going to look back more on the season and say, well, Michigan beat Ohio State and Michigan beat Michigan State. So that's the good stuff. But it's not really going to like completely change your mind on what the season is, right? Like you're still going to be like, man, there was a lot of deficiency on offense. The defense took some time to round into form. You're going to think about how good these exact players were. You're going to think about Mason Graham and just how beastly he is, but he doesn't owe you to play in this game. This game does him nothing but harm, right? Like his stock isn't going to go up in this game at all. Like doesn't really matter what he's done. He's done his job. We go to college generally to try to get jobs afterwards, right? You don't do it like you don't take an extra class just to do it, right? Like if you don't have to. Like maybe you do because you want to learn something, but like he doesn't need to. So why would he? So for those who are kind of like just like freaking out about the idea that some of these guys are like acting like they're traitors, like we've been through this rigmarole before with Rashawn Gary and Devin Bush, like just they gave you a national championship. These guys that just are leaving now did. They all played pivotal roles in the national championship run. So give them your praise in terms of that. Thank you for everything. Go be great. They will still be great ambassadors for Michigan. There's nothing more that they need to do for the Wolverines. So just calm down. So, okay, let's get to the Ohio State thing because it does kind of almost tie into this because it's about the thing that they like to try to say, the Ohio State fans, to try to get under Michigan fans' skin. And to me, it's hilarious because it's akin to Michigan State fans in 2021, right? Where, like, Michigan, once it beat Ohio State, no one cared that there was the loss to Michigan State. Michigan's going to the college football playoff. It's like we don't care. And they're like, oh, you traded all for a Michigan State win. No, we actually like it this way. It's kind of funny because it's my favorite part in the post game from all the videos I saw was Jack Sawyer's, you're not even going to the playoff. Your season's over. It literally was over for Mason Graham, clearly. But I just thought it was it was funny. Interesting. Colleague just told me that keep an eye out for Justice Haynes to Michigan. Funny that. Anyway, yeah, it's hilarious that tends to be an Ohio State line of like your season. What bowl game are you playing in? Bro, you'd trade in a heartbeat. Fourth straight loss to Michigan. Guess what? Michigan fans, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm going to speak for you. No one cares that Michigan's playing in the ReliaQuest Bowl, or if it was playing in the Pinstripe Bowl, or if it wasn't playing in a bowl game at all after beating Ohio State when they were 19.5-point favorites, right? The most talented team ever to take the field, right? Like that sounds very 1969-ish, by the way. Right, the best ever in college football. Wouldn't trade it for anything. It's wonderful. Ending the regular season on a high note in that way, because like we've all experienced it. The losing the final two games of the season, the Ohio State game and the bowl game. Well, guess what? No matter what happens in the bowl game, no one cares because you beat Ohio State. And then they showed that they don't know how to lose. It's wonderful. Keep talking, Ohio State fans, because it does not bother a single Michigan fan. Every Michigan fan licks up your tears like Cartman of Scott Tetterman. It is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing to see you so salty over it and try to trade off like, well, we're in the playoff. Michigan was just in the playoff the last 3 years. Michigan just won the national championship this calendar year. So no one cares. And you can sit there and say, oh, well, that's not... No, not a Michigan fan cares. Not one. Trophy too loud. Brr. All right, that's it. That's all we got. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll be back on Monday. Peace.